Hi, welcome to the channel. Welcome back if you're a current subscriber. Today I'm analyzing a few scenes that I found on a TikTok channel called FayJ Wife. I'm going to try to leave the link to that channel below, but I found a few scenes that I'm going to analyze today. A few things I was able to find here. I also want to apologize in advance. There are parts that have a pause and play button and things along the bottom. That is not on my end. Let's get into it.
The woman, Ashley, I gave her kind of the rundown that, we're newly reconnected. Unexpected. Expecting.
I love that.
A few things here that I've noted right off the bat are that Gypsy is fidgeting a bit. She's not directly looking at Ken. Ken is mostly concerned with the road, all of that being normal, of course. And then Gypsy turns to him and illustrates reconnected, and that makes sense, illustrating that with then towards herself, they both have reconnected. All of this makes sense, but there's a level of comfort here that they are going to break soon that I will talk about, but at the moment, Ken is towards her a bit, very comfortable in this middle part here. Gypsy, however, is a little more closed in. Her shoulders are closed in this way. She's not as open. She's fidgeting and she's saying things that she's not certain how Ken will react, and therefore she's not glancing over at him as much. She's focused on considering what she's going to say on the road, perhaps, on things she sees, but mostly on what she's going to say and how Ken is going to respond to this.
I just didn't think we needed couples therapy.
Oh, I support therapy in general. I know we don't have any issues, but it's nice to kind of see where we can improve on.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
I want to note Ken's part in this. First, Ken continues to have one arm on this middle piece here, but there's a bit of an adapter that pops up as Gypsy says that she knows that they don't have any issues. She just believes in therapy in general. You see that adapter, him looking away, and some lip compressions. Before that, right before that, he turns to her, glances at her very briefly, and you see a smile appear on the bottom of his face, but he has shades on, so I can't tell if there's anything up here, what's going on up here. Most likely not a lot. This, of course, is not a genuine smile, and I believe that's pretty apparent. This is a bit more along the lines of disbelief, feeling this is ridiculous, and not, of course, wanting to go along with this. Following that with the lip compressions confirms this, because that is wanting to say more, holding back, wanting to say something and how he truly feels about this. Gypsy, however, continues to avoid eye contact. With Gypsy, there are no eyebrow flashes around "oh, I know," even though her tone raises, attempting to be agreeable with him, to go along with what he's saying. And instead of eyebrow flashes, you see her eyes shift towards him, trying to see if he will react in any manner. She knows that this is deceptive, that she does not fully believe that they're only going because she thinks they need some sort of improvement in general, that there's something specific she wants to go over. And prior to this, we're mentioning them reconnecting, and her saying that she stated this to this counselor indicates that there's more along the lines of them connecting that she wants to go over. You then see an eye blink around, oh, improvement. Her chin goes down, defending this vulnerable part of her body. You see her hands go up in a stop gesture there. Defensiveness and also closed off. She's more reserved here again, not open and confident in this, and telling him this is exactly what's taking place. This is exactly what needs to happen and what we are there for. This seems more of a plea to continue to connect and agree, and acknowledging a bit that he doesn't want to go along with this, that he does not agree to this situation, but being a bit deceptive and making him believe that this is for an entirely different reason than what they're actually going for.
All right.
And also, I think that therapy is also helpful because we are in a stressful situation. With us being in the public eye,
Right.
us being new parents, and also not living together full time.
Right.
In this part, Gypsy continues to avoid eye contact, shifting her eyes very briefly over that direction. This indicates that perhaps she expects resistance here, that she knows that he, again, does not fully agree with this situation. There's eyebrow furrowing around in a stressful situation. She fully believes that, and that makes sense in that context, that she would have the eyebrow furrowing, and then public eye, her eyebrows raised, acknowledging that they are indeed in the public eye, but continuing to be closed off and not making full eye contact with him. Ken has distracted himself with the task of driving, which he should in this case. It's safety, of course, but he isn't glancing towards her or fully acknowledging or agreeing what she's saying. In fact, verbally, he's brief about his response and focusing on what he's doing, not fully accepting what she's saying. And in this case, perhaps this is why she is saying it, but she knows that he would not fully agree with because he is distracted with something else. You see a mouth shrug on one side of her face before she says, and living together. This is something that most people who have watched Gypsy for a long time know that she has been trying to push Ken to make a commitment. This is a bit manipulative, and perhaps she knows again that this is going to be met with resistance, that this is an intense topic to talk about with him, that he does not fully agree and is not on board with, even though she is pregnant at the time, and that is a commitment in itself. There are two different houses they're having to go between at this point in the show, his being all the way in Texas and she still is in Louisiana, according to this show. And so a lot of discomfort and inconvenience around there. She knows still that this is not something he's on board with changing, a high stress to him. And so she is perhaps starting to talk about this as she knows he is distracted and it won't fully land with him. Whereas if they were face to face on a couch somewhere, it would fully land what she's saying, and this perhaps would be met with even more resistance than what we're seeing in this moment.
Thank you. This is my first pregnancy. This is his first child as well.
Okay.
So,
Here, as Gypsy walks past Ken, he's holding the door open, which is a sign of respect, but he has an eyebrow flash and eye blocking an aversion to what's in front of him as she walks past. This is most likely just his disbelief that they are doing this, that they're in this situation, and disapproval of this being where they're at, and the fact that they're going to this place that he seems to find ridiculous, and then it cuts to the two on the couch. And even though they are touching, they are connecting in some manner, there's still some opposition there as their shoulders are apart and they're faced more towards each other. If you look at Ken's legs, he's taking up space on this couch, which can indicate casualness or comfort, but there's a lot of other indicators that something else is going on there. He has this arm this direction, and there's this adapter on Gypsy's leg, this self-soothing behavior he has going on. So not this open, fully casual communication. And if you look at one knee, it's more pointed towards the door. Now, this could indicate his desire to be out of the situation, out of this room, and uncomfortable about this. But there's this barrier here, his arm across, and this adapter, all of this indicating he is not feeling casual and comfortable about this situation. Gypsy is more open with her body language. Turned towards Ken, she does have that bit of a barrier there with her leg, but this is more her wanting to connect with him socially. And at the same time, she's illustrating all of these things with her hands, talking with her hands, connecting with this therapist, and indicating this lack of certainty around this entire situation. And verbally, she confirms this, of course, with saying that she doesn't know what to do in this situation. Now, prior to this, she had said that they were just there for general improvements, and now it's coming out that really she just wants to establish a deeper connection with Ken, indicated in all of what she is doing with her legs crossed towards him. She's facing him, but she's expressing uncertainty here and looking and making direct eye contact more with the counselor. She does have a bit of a high blink rate, but not enough to indicate a high level of stress here.
You were telling me that this is sort of a reconnection.
Now we have the counselor, and the counselor is leaned forward, engaged in this conversation with this couple, listening intently and very interested and focused. She's also confused, indicated by her hand on her chin here, and she's closed off. She's not sure what she's welcoming and inviting here. So, see this open, big body language as she's just listening intently and trying to figure out exactly what's taking place. You see a lot of uncertainty here, lack of confidence in what's going on, though she then says, "You told me that this was reconnecting." Perhaps she's feeling that that isn't precisely what this is, or that if it is a reconnection, if they have reconnected in some manner, that is not what she is seeing between the two so far. So her body language is small, closed off, but she's at the same time engaged with this couple and trying to figure this out. Then it cuts to Ken and Gypsy, and their body language has changed as well. Gypsy has crossed her legs, more closed off, not towards Ken. She's not connecting fully with him, and she then closes off. She's mirroring this counselor a bit here, which can be manipulative, I think, in this situation. It's just that she has been exposed, for lack of a better word, as to why they are really here now. Prior to this, she had told Ken that this is a general needing to improve, they don't have problems. Yet here they are, and Ken's eyes shift when the counselor says reconnecting, indicating he wasn't fully certain that what Gypsy had stated was going on. You see one wrist downward casually, the other hand grasping at his hand like this, weighing it down a bit. This is an indication of feeling perhaps powerlessness in the situation, and you see a lot of negative tonality. Nothing going on that indicates he is happy or confident or open about this interaction in any manner. Gypsy then has lip compressions, more she wants to say or holding something in, of course, something she disapproves and dislikes about what just took place, and perhaps again that is because the counselor has just told Ken what they really were there for.
Can you explain what the relationship is like back then, maybe?
I just saw her documentary and it was just like really just like heart shattering. It was really sad to see what she had gone through.
You see eye accessing with the counselor, and she, again, is just trying to figure out the situation. Leaned forward, engaged with this couple, interacting with them, listening intently, but still closed off, still just really not certain and confident about what's going on here. And then she illustrates, of course, back then maybe, illustrating with that timeline, and you see a bit of an eyebrow flash. It's really subtle, and then cuts to Ken and Gypsy. Gypsy is very uncomfortable here, of course. She situates her pillow, and then her arm goes this way, she leans this way, away from Ken a bit, putting distance between the two. Perhaps again, she's going to expect some opposition from Ken here, a negative reaction of some sort given what was just stated about why they were truly there. So perhaps that is why you see that level of discomfort and opposition, and then vertical lines in her face, negative tonality. She's not expecting his response to be a good thing. Then on to Ken. There's a lot of data collecting, just thinking what things were like as he responds pretty neutrally that there was this documentary he watched and it was heartbreaking. Though there's a bit of a lilt, it turns into a question when he says what she went through, as if he's not confident in his statement in that particular bit. What we're not seeing here, though, that we would expect to see or might expect to see here is that they're not touching, they're not showing affection in any manner, and this will to connect with each other, even though that's supposedly what they're there for. You see more opposition, more indications of feeling powerless and hesitant or unsure about how the other is going to react to what's being stated.
I had never written a letter to anyone in my life, but I just felt compelled to write her like a letter for compassion. We wrote back and forth for months, and then we just realized how much chemistry we have. And when I met her for the first time, it just started to go in that direction.
Ken's body language here is a little less reserved, a little less closed off, but he avoids eye contact with Gypsy. Again, not displaying any kind of affection we would see here. There's forehead creases and an eyebrow raise around. I've never written a letter to anyone before. His head goes down, but you see all of this in his forehead and his eyes that indicate that perhaps he's feeling a bit defensive about the fact that he has written to Gypsy in the first place, given he had not done so before, but honesty around that he had not done this before, emphasis around that, and significance around that. So that has been part of a controversy, him writing to someone who is in prison, and perhaps that's why you're seeing him lower his chin, protecting that vulnerable part of his body, a bit of shame there, but emphasis around him not having written a letter prior to this. Then there's eye accessing, data collecting, thinking about what took place next, just completely avoiding Gypsy's eye contact. As she sits and listens intently, you see her burying. She seems uncomfortable still, but then she repositions herself as perhaps she notes that he is not reacting in the way that she expected, and she can get a little more comfortable towards him, but she's facing him. Her lips are pursed. She is wanting to say more. She is holding something back, but listening at the same time to what he's just expressing here.
What?
Navigating how to properly communicate with each other's stress, because I just don't want to
Now both the counselor and Ken's body language seems to be a bit more open, as both of them know now what exactly they're there for, what they're inviting in, what they're more open to responding to. Gypsy, interestingly, is now the more closed off. And when I say closed off, I mean the shoulders are in, there's not open, large illustrations. It seems more reserved, more protective, less confident in what's being said. In this case, it's Gypsy because she's stating that she doesn't want to corrupt Ken's positivity. She's not making eye contact with him during this part, though. You see her considering, eye accessing, thinking about exactly what she's going to say, and illustrating this is what's taking place. It's asymmetrical, but still makes sense in this context. You continue to see a bit of space between the two, some opposition there. Perhaps Ken has lightly clasped hands. He's not feeling a lot of comfort here, but isn't as closed off and uncomfortable as he was prior to this. His head, however, slightly tilted as he's listening intently, but uncertain about what she's about to say. And with a slightly lowered eyebrow, but eyes wide open, looking at her, there's a bit of disapproval there.
Corrupt your positivity if I'm having a bad day, and don't see things in the most positive way.
Gypsy's tone lowers a bit as she's not confident in this part. She's propped up again with this one barrier between the two. There's a bit of distance between herself and Ken. There's a bit of opposition and resistance in both their body language and verbally what they're communicating. As Gypsy says, she doesn't want to corrupt his positivity, but she doesn't say this confidently. Ken's hand moves up under his eye on the side of his face. He's judging and evaluating what's being stated, but his eye contact is no longer with Gypsy, connecting with her. It's with the counselor, trying to figure out if she's on the same page, if she's reacting in some manner to this information, and further evaluating and listening to what's being stated from Gypsy. But again, with the lowering of eyebrows slightly and the pupils upward a bit, this indicates a lack of approval and some level of disbelief in this case. And Gypsy is the one now trying to establish this connection with Ken, get him in agreement and on the same side, which he is not reciprocating. And this distance between the two indicates resistance, some level of opposition and disagreement between the two. If you think about it, if you have a family member or friend that you are bonded and in agreement with, you are typically physically on their side or establishing eye contact. There's more positive tonality, more smiling, laughing, genuine laughter, more forehead creases, more indications that you are connecting to each other. There's leaning forward, just building rapport, or further connecting with that individual. Typically, you wouldn't lean away, barrier, close off, and look towards them with that distance between the two of you. Now, this is a counseling session. That is where they belong in this case, and there's a lot that's going to be said that the other is going to disapprove of. But that's just what we're seeing here body language-wise. Ken does not want to be here. He continues to have one knee towards the door, indicating that he wants to escape, that he's not fully committed to this conversation, and then that judgment and evaluation and disapproval that you see in his face.
Okay.
I don't like that. I'd rather you just be honest with me. Just
You know,
know what's
always
going
be
on.
honest, but if I bring up a topic that maybe he's not interested in talking about at the time, he shuts down.
Her tone raises when she says always, but then goes back down when she says be honest. There's a bit of an eye block, a diversion when she says honest, and her head goes back. She's not making eye contact any longer, and she no longer takes this seriously. There's no vertical lines in her face or anything indicating that she truly means this. And then that follow up with the word but, indicating in some scenarios, in conflict with saying the word always, there will be times that she's not as honest. Now, we do know based on her own words that she is a pathological liar and is manipulative. Not just my opinion, it's her own words and pattern of behaviors that have proven this.
I would be curious if anybody Gypsy has talked to feels they're getting the full story.
This is actually kind of the first time I've been honest. Besides being honest, you know, my attorneys, even that, I haven't been completely honest with them, so...
And you see that in words such as this, her head going up, and that positive tonality indicating she doesn't take this as seriously, and this conflict in her words, an asymmetrical shoulder shrug, and then the counselor repositions herself, perhaps mirroring Gypsy a bit, creating that distance, pulling back as Gypsy had it prior to this, and she clasps her hands in her lap. She's feeling a level of discomfort listening to what's being stated and what's going on here. She notes this negative tonality. It's expressed in her face that she's not happy or laughing with them or laughing with Gypsy or smiling as Gypsy is. She does very much take this seriously and notes that this is not something that is a reconnection, that they are not here for a positive reason that Gypsy had stated prior to this at the beginning of this session. She's not as closed off as she was. The tension in her shoulders or anything that we saw at the beginning of this, as again, she knows and understands really what this couple is here for. Gypsy then becomes more serious. You do see the vertical lines in her chin going down, that defensive, protective movement there over that vulnerable part of her body. And she establishes eye contact with the counselor and illustrates closing down. Ken shuts down. And then you see tension in her lower jaw. She feels a bit of disdain and aggression towards this perhaps.
Just, stressors. Social media has been a big stressor for us, and he has a harder time with it. I've been in it longer.
Gypsy's voice is lower here, and it has been noted in the past by people such as her ex-husband Ryan that Gypsy will use this childlike voice perhaps when she is trying to get something she wants, get her way, manipulate people, and you're hearing that a tiny bit here, I believe. You certainly don't hear confidence in her tone and her body language. She's closed off. Allegedly, she's pregnant here, so this could be the real reason behind her hand being on her stomach across this direction. But she certainly has some distance from the counselor and Ken. She isn't sitting upright. You don't see the confidence in the forehead, creases in the eyebrow, raising everything we should be seeing here if she was confident in what she's saying, and she even says, I'm here at this bit, but notice Ken's body language. All of it is pointed away from her, more towards what I imagine where the door would be, and again, he didn't seem eager to be here in the first place, so this makes sense. But a lot of opposition towards Gypsy, and you see that as well with the knee straight, that direction almost blocking her off, whereas the other knee is pointed a little more towards where I imagine the door would be. Then of course the disdain on his face, the lip raising up, the eyebrows going down, and him flinching away from her a bit, indicating that he deeply disapproves of and has disdain for what she just stated, which is that Ken has more of an issue with the social media presence and everything that happens on social media. He does not believe this. Gypsy herself perhaps doesn't even seem to believe this, as she does not say this confidently. And truly, we've seen her online a lot fighting with TikTok hackers and people in comment sections, so it makes more sense that she might have more of a problem with this, and that you see that lack of confidence in her, Ken confidently disagreeing.
Answer that I gave you would rebuttal it. Like, I'd be like, okay, well then I'll stop doing it. Well, you've said that before. Okay, well then I'll try and be more adamant about it this time. Well, I don't know if that's going to be true or not. And I was just like, well, I don't know what you want me to say.
In this bit, Gypsy's exhibiting a lot more defensive, protective behavior as she has her hands across her stomach. Again, could be because she's pregnant, allegedly. Most likely is because she's feeling uncomfortable. You see that indicated in several other behaviors here, such as rapid eye blinking, her chin being down, protecting that vulnerable part of herself, and then Ken being very illustrative and expressive with what he's saying. He's not making eye contact fully with her. At one point, he's at the edge of his seat. He's expressing something that seems defensive and aggressive, but not connecting and fully seeing if Gypsy's in agreement or on the same page. It seems this is something he's very confident and in disagreement with her about. This idea of social media being this large stressor and factor, and that he had not tried to communicate or did not do so well. He seems very defensive about this. He's on the edge of his seat. He's very tense, but you see that closed off body language, but much smaller hand movements that would indicate that feeling strongly about this, especially since it could be the reason that there's this disconnect between Gypsy and himself. But he's on the edge of his seat, ahead of her, not facing her for a good bit of this. And then at times when he is next to her, he isn't fully next to her. There's this distance, this space, this resistance, this opposition, and they aren't affectionate, they aren't bonding, they aren't connecting. And he seems to have most of his body headed towards the door.
Sorry.
Calm down. Not that scary.
Now we've skipped to the dinner scene that a lot of people also wanted me to discuss. At the beginning here, you see a lot of positive tonality with Gypsy, less so with Ken. He's distracted with cutting up this octopus, and there's a lot going on here. Body language-wise, not so much, because Ken just nods his head very subtly, but again is distracted mostly with cutting up the octopus. He didn't, however, ask her if she wanted this. He did not see what she wanted. He did not have that concern or level of care for her to do this. Now, that's what's being discussed right now, is that perhaps he is disgusted by her, has a lot of disdain for her. You certainly see someone who is being more concerned with himself than he is for Gypsy, his pregnant girlfriend. Just a lot going on there that raises some questions. Body language wise, what we don't see is a level of shame and guilt from Ken in this bit. He is more concerned with this octopus and cutting it up, and not so much with her. He keeps his head down, distracted with the task of cutting up food. Gypsy, however, she has a shrill laugh at first, and then that goes down. She looks towards somebody, looks at Ken, forces more laughter, and distracts herself with wiping off something. But no level of shame or embarrassment. There's nothing going on that indicates that Ken is embarrassed by this, which tells me that this isn't a brand new incident, something that is out of the realm of normal behavior for Gypsy or himself.
Don't think about it, just eat it.
I'll put it up.
It's really good.
We're doing like a
No?
The scene starts off with Gypsy eye blocking. She looks up. There's a forehead crease there, as she also has a stop gesture, and she's saying, "Don't be dramatic." This indicates a level of impatience with even herself, and Ken is just watching her closely to see what her reaction is. She then has mouth blocking, as of course she does not like the food. And what we don't see from Ken, that we should be seeing from Ken, is concern. We see surprise, the eyebrows up and the eyes widened, but positive tonality across his face. He's feeling disbelief at the fact that this is not good to her. There is forehead creasing and eyebrow flashing around. It's good. He fully believes that it is good and is surprised that she does not think so, but she is thoroughly disgusted at octopus and impatient with herself prior to this. What we should see expressed on Ken's face is concern, some level of guilt, some level of embarrassment or shame perhaps for not considering her, for having her try a food that she does not like, and some level of indication that he's protective of her in some manner. And instead, Gypsy's met with surprise, disbelief, and a lack of concern.
Just swallow it. Just swallow it. He'll be ridiculous.
Okay, down.
Oh God, kill me.
Really, it's that bad? I think it's amazing.
Ken continues to indicate a lack of concern. There's no eyebrow furrowing, forehead creasing. It's all surprise and disbelief at this. Perhaps there's a part of him that enjoys it and he wanted their connection and agreement to be around this. He's even leaned towards her, really engaged in what she's doing and how she feels about this, but there's no level of concern that you would expect to see from a caring partner. And then he says, "Don't be ridiculous," being a bit condescending towards her, and he starts to create distance. He coughs. Perhaps he knows that there's a camera, that people are watching, there's this audience. You don't see shame and guilt, though. You don't see him becoming defensive, just this uncomfortable bit of a cough, and him pulling back, him withdrawing, and this disdain around her not being in agreement that this is a good food. So perhaps, again, this is something that he wanted to connect with her on personally, an experience that he thought that they could share and important to him in some manner, but instead she's in disagreement with this, breaks that connection, that will to connect there that Ken perhaps did have in this moment. But we're not seeing concern. We're not seeing him behave in the manner that he would be expected to, given again that this is his pregnant girlfriend, and she isn't liking the food that he chose, that he did not even ask her to agree on in the first place. With Gypsy, you see all of the behaviors you would see if she were speaking about something she didn't approve of. You see the eye blocking, the mouth blocking, the lip compressions, everything that you would see if she were speaking and saying something she wasn't comfortable with, or feeling something that she was in disapproval of. Perhaps why Ken withdraws and says something that is a bit condescending, that he feels she is just perhaps being disapproving of the food because she is being ridiculous, as he states, and not that she truly dislikes the food, but that she is acting perhaps immaturely.
It was delicioso.
Very good. She doesn't love it. This is her first time.
Oh, good. I'm good.
What's good to you, baby?
Oh, I have a fear of octopuses, so the is just like, eat it.
Well, she tried.
I did.
You see nothing in the orbicularis muscles when the waiter approaches, and Gypsy's smiling in the lower half of her face, but that drops when Ken tells the waiter that she did not love the food. You see that drop, but nothing changes in her eyes, just confirming that that was not a genuine smile. Now, there's nothing particularly wrong with that. People do it in customer service positions every day. They establish this idea that things are okay, that they are positive and happy, when it is more apparent that it is just an act. However, Ken pulls this waiter into their conflict here, which is pretty telling of his communication skills. They are frequently pulling others into it. And you see that in a lot of what they do with Rod, Ken, Christy, Raina, which is his mom, Mia, and others around them. Everyone gets an input on their relationship, which allows for a disconnect, and is possibly the reason that the two are not necessarily bonded. Now, it's also possible that Gypsy has antisocial personality disorder and cannot connect with Ken or anybody else, and you've seen that pattern with her as well, that I won't go into in this particular video. But Ken engages more and pulls in this waiter into their conflict here. He tilts his head back, exposing that vulnerable part. It's towards the waiter. His head is more towards the waiter. He's more engaged and connecting with the waiter. His eyes go down towards Gypsy and his hands go out towards Gypsy, as if she's a spectacle, as if this is not his girlfriend and he is not bonded or connected to her, but someone who perhaps should be ashamed of themselves in some way, not someone normal. So he has yet again put himself on the opposite of Gypsy. Even body language wise, he's distanced himself from her. Interestingly, she's not as distanced. Even more, this is just what we would not expect to see from a loving couple. Someone who would willingly and openly tell a waiter or an outside person that something is wrong, especially if it is within their relationship and within a communication between the two of them. Especially since she is pretending to be positive about this, and he is telling this waiter that she is dishonest, that she doesn't actually like the meal, that something's wrong with her, and it can be a bit shameful. And again, it's not what we would expect from a boyfriend and a girlfriend.
You want some?
Mm-mm.
You want to try a little bit?
Nope.
Yes, you will. Go try a little bit.
Is that tomato?
I won't put any tomato in there.
All right.
Watermelon?
This is too much. Thanks. What is it?
It's tomato, crab, and watermelon salad.
Oh.
This wasn't the full scene of the dinner scene. I could not find, again, the rest of this, but a lot takes place during the scene that seemed awkward, off, hurtful towards Gypsy. Gypsy at one point shows a bit of disgust, and her nostrils flare, some stress around him telling this waiter that she's lying. Forehead crease when he says she's lying, some significance to that. And he tells her that she is disappointing. All things that you would not expect from a boyfriend towards his girlfriend who's allegedly pregnant. You would expect some concern, some forehead creasing and eyebrow furrowing, some grief muscles, something that indicated a level of concern, and then him not further pulling in this waiter into their issues and then shaming her in front of this waiter, degrading her in front of this waiter. You would not expect all of these things from a boyfriend. And again, Ken's sexuality has been questioned, but also we have to consider that Gypsy had deceived him when she pulled him into the counselor's office and in other areas of their lives. So this could be some sort of vengeance for that. Perhaps it could be because he wanted this connection to be over this meal that's important to him, that he particularly likes, and that he is in fact hurt even though he did not personally create this meal. He's offended a bit and upset that she did not like this and is not in agreement with, and this is not something that they could bond or share together. He also might consider her immature, might feel that she's just being immature and disagreeable, might feel that she likes this but is just causing a scene. It could be a number of things. So this entire scene really was strange in the grand scheme of things, because there's a lot of possibilities here as to what really took place. There's some editing that could have taken place, and we wonder why Lifetime would put this particular scene out there to make Ken look bad, because it does make Ken look bad. And while it's very possible Ken may behave this way behind the scenes, what we're seeing on camera should have been edited out, given that Gypsy's narrative on social media is that the two are great, they're wonderful, they're perfect, everything's going well. Instead, we see this, which paints her as a victim, and that's another possibility, that this perhaps paints her as a bit of a victim, Ken in a negative light. That way, if Gypsy happens to break up with Ken, it doesn't seem to be her fault, and everybody is basically cheering for this split, regardless of who she ends up with next. It's possible there's not even going to be a next season, and that does not matter, but it paints her in a victim narrative, and was interesting that they kept this in. There's people that say that he is on illegal substances, or that he has been before. That's another possibility. Just a lot that could have taken place here. My personal thoughts are that he wanted to connect over this meal. This was one of his favorites. He thought they could get together and have this agreeable, happy situation despite what had just taken place in the counselor's office, and instead what he was met with was Gypsy being disgusted and disagreeable. That's my thoughts on this and my analysis. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you've watched this far, please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Thank you for watching.